The Watershed Association in Hays County gave a tough update today, revealing Jacob's Well remains closed as the spring experiences zero flow.
Jacob's Well is a small pool of water, so clear you can see every pebble. Cool, blue, and calm. It is exactly the kind of place you would want to jump into on a hot day. People in Texas have been swimming here for generations. But do you know what recent drone footage found once it pushed past the upper part everyone sees? A narrow opening that drops straight down into total darkness, deeper than a 10-story building, twisting and turning into tunnels so tight that divers have to take their air tanks off just to fit through. And that's not all. The footage also showed old diving gear, equipment that has not been sold in decades, equipment that brought back to life a 40-year-old tragedy. This is the story of Jacob's Well, and why experts still call it one of the most dangerous dive sites on the planet. Let's get into it. A beautiful trap. Jacob's Well sits in the Texas Hill Country, just outside a small town called Wimberley. On a hot summer day, it looks like paradise. The water is a deep, glowing blue. It stays a cool 68 degrees all year round. The opening of the well itself is only about 12 feet wide. That is barely bigger than a small bedroom. Yet from that tiny opening, the cave system stretches down more than 4,000 feet into the earth. This is the part most swimmers never think about. Right below that calm blue circle, the ground disappears. The first drop takes you straight down about 30 feet. Then the cave keeps going, bending and twisting, chamber after chamber. Locals call it a swimming hole, and for most visitors, that is exactly what it is. But Jacob's Well is so much more than just a place to go for a swim. It is the mouth of a spring, a place where water from deep underground pushes up to the surface. And until 2000, that water was pushed to the surface with such pressure that it used to shoot straight up into the air, sometimes even several feet high. People say you could hear it from the road, like the earth itself was breathing. Some people even believed the well had no bottom at all. That's not true. It does have a bottom. But what lies between the surface and that bottom has proven far more dangerous than anyone expected. Over the years, this quiet swimming hole has taken more than a dozen lives. Most of these were experienced divers who went further than they should have. So how exactly does something this beautiful turn this deadly? To understand that, you need to understand what the cave actually looks like once you go under. Inside the cave system. Divers who have explored Jacob's Well describe it as a series of rooms connected by narrow doorways. Except the doorways are barely wide enough for a single human body, and the rooms are filled with pitch-black water. The first chamber is the easiest part. It drops straight down about 30 feet, and most swimmers who peek underwater see this. Experienced divers say there is no real danger in this part. Past that, the second chamber opens up wider. It slopes down at an angle until it reaches around 75 feet. At that point, divers hit a passage so narrow that cavers gave it a nickname, the birth canal. It is barely 2 feet across. Anyone heading deeper has to squeeze through it. You can hold your oxygen tank in front of you or let it trail behind you. There is almost no room to turn around. Past the birth canal is the third chamber. It is wider and colder, sitting close to 90 feet down. This is where natural light disappears completely. Without a dive light, you are in total darkness. This chamber has another nasty trick. It has what cave divers call a false exit, a gap in the rock that looks like a way out, but actually leads nowhere. Many divers have died chasing that false opening, thinking it was their path back to the surface. Beyond the third chamber is an even narrower squeeze. It is described as barely 15 inches of clearance and around 15 feet long. This tight corridor leads to the fourth chamber, roughly 100 feet below the surface. This is the point most divers never come back from. Local dive shop owner Don Dibble has spent more than 40 years working around Jacob's Well. He has said plainly that this location has earned its reputation the hard way. It is not the biggest cave in Texas, and it is not the deepest. What makes it dangerous is that it looks manageable right up until it is not, and by then it is too late. Loose gravel lines the floor throughout these deeper chambers, and that gravel does not stay still. It shifts, it slides. In tight spaces, a diver's own movement can be enough to trigger a small collapse, burying an arm, a leg, sometimes an entire body, in seconds. You might assume the danger is only for reckless divers ignoring the rules. That is not the case. Many experienced divers have gone into the well and never come out. Researchers have been trying to study what lies beneath for decades. And in 2023, they finally sent drones with cameras down to find out what really lies beneath its dark waters. What the drones found. The Jacob Well Exploration Project sent down the drones in 2023, which were equipped with bright lights, cameras, and sonar. They were capable of mapping the cave system and its chambers in detail. When we finally got early footage from the drones, it genuinely wowed the viewers. It showed the well at its most beautiful. Smooth limestone walls curling like ribbons of stone. Water so clear it looks unreal. But as the drones pushed deeper into the second and third chambers, the footage started becoming grim, ominous. Cameras picked up old equipment and forgotten gear. Personal items left behind by people who went in and simply never came back. As the drones went deeper and deeper, viewers online were struck by just how much of the past was still sitting there. Rusted tanks, old-style masks, the kind that have not been manufactured in decades. It made everyone question just how many divers had lost their lives here. Then suddenly, the people watching were pulled out of their thoughts when the footage showed something dark. Something that took everyone back to that fateful night in September 1979, when Kent Malpin and Mark Brashear dived in Jacob's Well and never returned. Drones found fragments of equipment that Kent and Mark were known to be using on the night of the infamous dive. The passage that took those two young lives still holds physical evidence of that night, undisturbed and waiting to be found more than 4 decades later. Watching that footage, it is hard not to wonder how many more untold stories are still sitting in those dark chambers. One such story almost happened in July of 2015, when a 21-year-old named Diego Adame decided to free dive into Jacob's Well. A diver's close call. Free diving means no scuba tank, no air supply, just a single breath and whatever your lungs can hold. Adam had practiced this before, pushing a little deeper each time he tried. On this particular day, he decided to go for a personal record, diving further into the cave than he ever had. Partway down, without warning, one of his fins came loose. For a free diver, that kind of problem is catastrophic. Every second underwater is borrowed time. Losing a fin means losing speed and precious time. Adam needed to think fast, and he did. He cut away his weight belt, the one piece of gear holding him down. Losing that weight meant he could rise back to the surface before his air ran out. He struggled upwards. It was a race against time. He only had a few seconds to make it out. And just when it looked like time had run out, Adam broke through the water. He made it out. Afterward, he admitted that for a brief moment, he genuinely believed that day might be his last. His story is not an isolated case. It is a pattern. Experienced divers, confident swimmers, careful planners. All of them have found out the same way how quickly something can go wrong in those tight spaces beneath Jacob's Well. That brings us to 9th September 1979, the darkest chapter in the well's history, the one that changed how this place is viewed forever, and the one that the recent drone expeditions have brought back into public conversation. The night everything changed. In September of 1979, a group of about 20 people from Pasadena, Texas, drove out to Wimberley. They were ready for a weekend of camping and diving at Jacob's Well. Among them were two young men named Kent Maupin and Mark Brasher. Kent was 20 years old, but he had been diving since he was 12. He worked part-time at a dive shop back home and was already a certified instructor. He knew the well's reputation. He knew that at least 4 divers had already died in the exact section he wanted to explore. Mark was 21, a student. He was newer to serious diving, but eager to keep up with his more experienced friend. The group arrived late, close to midnight. Most people would have waited until morning before diving. Kent and Mark did not want to wait. They suited up almost immediately and headed into the water with a few others. They were determined to push past the 3rd chamber and into the narrow squeeze that led toward Chamber 4. They had no backup lights. They had no safety line tying them to the surface. They had no backup tanks. A diver named Joe Moy was also with them that night. He watched Kent and Mark approach the narrow opening leading toward the 4th chamber. They pulled their tanks along behind them because the gap was too tight to wear the gear on their backs. Moy tried to get their attention. He waved his light back and forth. He banged his knife against his own tank to make noise underwater. He was desperately hoping they would look back and reconsider. They didn't. Moy was running on low air just like Kent and Mark. He had no choice but to head back up. When he reached the surface, he already suspected that Kent and Mark were not coming back. The rescue that almost failed. As night turned to panic, word spread through the camp that 2 divers had gone missing. A rescue call went out, and among those who responded was Don Dibble. Even in 1979, he was an experienced diver with a military background and years of technical training. Dibble arrived in the dark and made the difficult decision to wait until morning. Back in 1979, Dibble was not as familiar with the well as he is today. And diving blind into an unknown, dangerous cave at night was a risk that even a seasoned professional was not willing to take. The next morning, Dibble went in alongside a local game warden named Calvin Turner. They did everything by the book. Extra air tanks were staged at different depths along the route. Safety lines were secured. Nothing was left to chance. Dibble pushed toward the same narrow passage that had swallowed Kent and Mark the night before. The passage was barely wide enough for one man to pass through. He worked his way into the gravel-filled squeeze. Water rushed past him. Loose stones kicked him straight on his mask. He continued forward without hesitation. Then, without warning, the passage gave way. Loose gravel shifted and came down around him fast. His arms were pinned. His chest was locked so tightly to the walls of the cave that he could barely expand his lungs to breathe. In an instant, Dibble went from diving to being buried alive under the weight of the cave itself. He could not reach his tank to signal for help. He could not move enough to dig himself free. Time was running out. Dibble later admitted that in those final moments, with his air supply nearly gone, he considered letting the water take him rather than face a slow suffocation. Then his body convulsed just enough to shift the gravel slightly. Enough light returned for him to make out a shape moving toward him in the murky water. It was Calvin Turner who had dived with him. He had come back with a spare air source and pushed it directly into Dibble's mouth. Dibble survived that moment. But the danger was not over. As he rose toward the surface, the air he had swallowed earlier began expanding inside his body. By the time he reached open air, his stomach had swollen painfully. Doctors later discovered that the wall of his stomach had actually ruptured. He was rushed to a military medical center where he came dangerously close to dying from the infection that followed. Don Dibble survived, barely. But Kent Maupin and Mark Brasher were still down there, and the search did not stop. 12 days and no way through. One of the men who refused to give up was a 46-year-old diver named Don Broad. He had a reputation as someone who saw dangerous dives as a personal challenge. Broad went in and located the corridor packed with gravel where the two young men were believed to be trapped. To most people, that gravel would look like nothing more than rock and sediment. Broad saw it differently. He believed it was, in every practical sense, their grave. He proposed a plan to get them out. Start clearing the gravel from the top down, section by section, in hopes of eventually reaching the two divers. It was slow, dangerous, and physically brutal work. It was also the only thing that gave the families of Kent and Mark something they desperately needed: hope. The families had gotten a new life from that hope. They pooled in everything they had and called in a specialized recovery company called Schaefer Diving. Schaefer Diving brought with them a mobile decompression chamber and a full recovery team. The owner, Louis Schaefer, took one look at the blocked passage and reportedly said very little beyond a stunned exclamation. He said the scale of the blockage was worse than anyone had described over the phone. However, that didn't mean they were about to give up. For 12 days, the Schaefer team did everything possible to get through the gravel blockage. Crews ran suction hoses down into the cave. They pulled out gravel and dumped it into the nearby creek. Divers hauled larger rocks out by hand, one at a time. It was exhausting, dangerous labor, and the cave did not make it easy. Every time crews cleared a few feet of passage, loose material slid back in behind them, erasing hours of progress in minutes. 12 days after Kent Maupin and Mark Brashear disappeared into that passage, the recovery effort was officially called off. Their bodies were never brought out. To this day, most accounts agree that their remains are still somewhere within that section of the cave, sealed behind a natural wall of shifting gravel that no one has been able to get through. And that's not the end of the story. The spring that used to shoot water up for several feet, the one that looked like it was bottomless and an infinite source of water, may finally be running dry. A spring running dry. For most of its recorded history, Jacob's Well has never stopped flowing, not even during Texas's worst droughts in the mid-20th century. That changed in the year 2000, when the spring stopped flowing completely for the first time ever recorded. It has since stopped again in 2008, 2011, 2013, and 2022. Each time it stops for longer stretches of time than before. The main reason is simple. A water company called Aqua Texas has been pumping large amounts of water out of the same underground rock layer that feeds Jacob's Well. Regulators have fined the company for pumping well beyond its legal limit, but the damage has been done. In 2010, Hays County stepped in, purchasing 50 acres of land around the well to help protect it. Local conservation groups added even more acreage soon after. Guided tours, fencing, and monitoring programs followed. But protecting the land around a spring does not automatically refill the underground water that feeds it. Some scientists believe full recovery of the rock layer could take years, possibly decades, if it happens at all. There have also been alarming reports of low water levels and unsafe water quality of the well. In hopes of conservation and recovery, it has often been closed to visitors for extended periods of time. And despite it all, Jacob's Well has never lost its reputation. It remains one of the most talked about and most dangerous dive locations in the country. Jacob's Well looks like one of the most peaceful places in Texas, with its clear water and cool temperatures. It is a perfect summer swimming hole. But underneath that calm surface sits a cave system that has taken more than a dozen lives, including 2 young divers whose bodies remain there to this day. Do you think anyone will ever fully explore the deepest chambers of Jacob's Well? Or is some of it simply meant to stay hidden? Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next mystery we dig into. We'll see you in the next one.